On this episode, we are thrilled to welcome a truly multifaceted talent to our Artist Salon Series, Alex Alpert. Hailing from the vibrant streets of New York City, Alex's artistic journey is as diverse as it is inspiring. From his early days as a street artist while studying music, to making waves at Universal Music Group, where he married the worlds of art and music through brand partnerships, marketing, and live event performances, Alex has not only painted murals across the country, but also brought his unique stream of consciousness illustrations to life at major events, collaborating with celebrated brands, musicians, and athletes. As a visual artist, creative director, and occasional guest instructor at the Children's Museum of the Arts, Alex embodies the spirit of innovation and the power of art to connect and inspire. On this episode, we'll discuss his journey, his process, and how he continues to shape the landscape of contemporary art. Please join me in welcoming Alex Alpert.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting is that you studied music, and yet you're also a visual artist. Take us back to the very beginning. I'm really curious about your earliest memories being creative across these different dimensions. Do you remember the first time where, whether it's music or a piece of art, really resonated with you?
Yeah, so I kind of have that conflict that when I'm in a room with a lot of creative people, I feel like many relate to, which is I like to express myself in different ways. So I did a lot of music and I did a lot of visual arts. And I feel like a lot of my life has been trying to balance the two, picking one and feel like I'm neglecting the other. And yes, I started mostly in music. I was raised in a pretty creative family. My mom was an opera singer and a singing teacher. So I grew up like music lessons happening in my house. My dad's a writer. I really did a lot of both when I was younger. A lot of art classes, art shows, but a lot of music lessons. So I was a pianist and singer when I was younger, and that was very much my focus. The art was kind of a hobby for me, something I really enjoyed. And at the time, it was just a very kind of therapeutic, nice way of expressing myself, while the music was kind of more of my professional endeavors. I ended up going to college for music. I was a performance major and took art classes kind of for fun on the side. And yeah, music kind of took most of my attention at that time. And once I graduated, I decided I wanted to be more on the industry side of things. I took a job at Universal Music Group. And it was at that point I was like, oh, I can kind of use the visual art stuff with the music stuff. So I got in the creative department at UMG, at some of the different labels. I was at Interscope for a bit doing creative services. And I moved to LA at that time, so I was at UMG there. And it was at that point I was like, okay, I can kind of maybe use these two sides of myself together. And it was interesting to kind of bring those together in my brain and realize that it's not an issue having to focus on one. You can kind of have both, and hopefully they benefit one another. So music industry stuff was good. I enjoyed it. It was a great experience, but I also decided I wanted to start to develop my own thing. And a few years ago, like 2019 or so, I moved back to New York from LA, started taking my art more seriously. I started with custom sneakers. So I drew on shoes. I usually have them when I'm doing these talks that I can show, but we take them off here, so they're over by the doorway. But if you see shoes with art on them, those are mine.
Don't steal them.
Yeah, thank you. And it was cool because I had all these music industry connections with musicians and stuff, so I was able to make custom shoes for the musicians I was working with, which was a good promotional thing and just a way of getting it out there. And I had my art kind of as a side hobby that I decided I wanted to grow more. I started doing more kind of large scale stuff. So I started doing murals and street art around the city. Started speaking with brands and businesses and, trying to tell their story with my art. And I think my experience working at UMG and kind of in the business world really helped me. So like now a lot of my work I do is I'll do like designs for different brands. So I'm doing very random. I'm doing like Subway. I'm doing their packaging for the world. So like if you go to like the Subway, you'll see like their sandwich wrappers will have my art on it, or like Nike. We're doing like a line of sneakers, and we do a lot of custom sneakers with that. And it's a lot of kind of brand business stuff, commercial stuff. And I think because I worked in the business side of things, uh, that felt very natural to me as opposed to like the fine art world. And I found myself really leaning into the kind of brand collaborations and, telling the story of a brand rather than like gallery stuff. I'm doing a little bit of that too, but I've kind of like found this niche where it's more kind of like commercial work. So that's kind of the broad strokes. There's a lot of stuff in between, but yeah, still do some music when I can. But like art has kind of taken over most of my time as it's become more of my business. Um, yeah.
That's awesome. I want to spend some time diving into that in a minute, but something you said was really interesting. You said that your mom was an opera singer, and so I'm curious, what was it like growing up in an environment in which one of your parents was an artist or is an artist? Like, is it something where your mom's
It
like,
was loud.
"Don't do it,
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
do it," or was she
Nah.
like encouraging
That's
you?
funny you say that.
You know?
Yeah, there's a lot of anxiety in my family. There's a lot of like, depression, anxiety, stuff like that, which is very much a part of myself and my work. My mom was a very serious opera singer, like in her 20s, 30s, and had my brother and I, and I think was very scared of the idea of being a full-time artist while being a parent, and maintained a lot of those kind of fears. And although she was very excited that I was creative and pursuing the arts, I think she also like communicated a lot of the anxieties that go along with being a full-time artist, entrepreneur, what have you, having your own thing. So that was kind of instilled in me. So I got a lot of you know pursue your arts, pursue your passion, but I also got a lot of maybe you should also get your degree, maybe you should also get a full-time job, maybe you should also get benefits and things like that. So I had to navigate that. It was kind of an interesting journey. I'm really glad that I got both perspectives, because I think I have in my brain, maybe what if I had just like gone all in as an artist when I was younger, what would happen now? But I'm actually very grateful that I ended up having like this kind of weird journey of working corporate for a little bit and then pursuing my art, and who knows, maybe I'll take another corporate job. I don't know. Um, so yeah, it was very accepting creatively and very encouraging, and I got all the lessons and all the classes and education creatively. But there was like a kind of fear there too that was instilled in me too.
Right. And what better way to, heed your mom's advice than to go to school for music, of course.
I
Yeah.
know. I was
Clearly
lucky.
that's the way to.
Well,
That's
I got a scholarship for it, so she didn't
Nice.
have to pay for it, so that made it okay.
That helps. That helps.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Law school, music school.
I
law
know.
school,
I
music
know.
school.
God.
That's awesome. And so, I think what's interesting is like, you're known for your street art, but music was what you went to school for. And as you told the story, that sounds like your initial passion. So you go to music school, and you know, you were doing street art as a hobby on the side. Like, when did that sort of take shape for you? How did you even get into, visual art? It sounds like initially your journey into the arts was as a musician, and so I'm curious how the visual arts came to play.
I was always kind of doing both, so while I was taking music lessons when I was younger, I was in art classes. I did a lot of visual arts drawing, mostly like kind of 2D art, but some 3D art stuff. So when I was at college, music became like my major that I was like, all right, I gotta go do some music theory or whatever like that I had to do, and then the art was like my fun kind of side class. So I was always doing art and kind of developing those skills. It was a really therapeutic thing for me. You know, I mentioned I've struggled with certain like mental illness stuff, so having art was always a very valuable way for me to kind of work through things and express myself. Um, and then eventually, like I did the shoe thing, and somebody wanted to pay me for it, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like I can make money with this thing that's been a very, kind of personal way of expressing myself. And as I think a lot of people have experienced, when people start paying you for your art, it kind of changes and it kind of shifts. So it's been a kind of a journey since then, trying to hold on to something that was therapeutic and fun for me, and has now become a business. It it's honestly relatively new, and I mentioned this to you earlier. Like me making art my business is a pretty new thing for me, to be honest. It's something I really got serious about post COVID, because I started working remotely for UMG, so I had more time, to like start making art. So it's really like the past like 3-4 years that I have kind of slowly been building it as a business. And like a year and a half ago is when I went full time with it. And yeah, so it's still something I'm kind of like developing and figuring out. I've been lucky to have some cool projects, but I'm also excited to see kind of how it grows. And it's just become this like fun, exciting but intimidating journey, and I think it always will be that way, and that's cool.
That's awesome. Take me to the moment of the sale. This is your first ever thing that you've sold that is a piece of art. I mean, for the musicians in the room, we make, I think, something like 0.003 cents per play on Spotify. So clearly someone's paying you more than a penny for your shoe. Take us to that moment when someone was like, hey, I love this so much, I want to buy it.
Yeah, I mean, visual arts is funny, right? Because it's completely kind of subjective, the prices that you put on things, and it's the value that you kind of put into it. I really started it out like I'm gonna charge, $50 to my friend, and hopefully he wears it and he'll like it, and like we'll see what happens. And then you get people coming to you who want to pay you more than what you were going to even ask, and then it's a lot of kind of like, honestly, like business sales techniques. You'd be like, all right, I'm gonna let you name a number first, and I'll kind of wait, and then you come back with something higher than that, and you meet in the middle. And it's it was exciting for sure. And I was like, all right, it's a great side hustle at first, right? I was like, this is going to be great to supplement my full-time income. And then once you start like landing your first real deals, and you're like, okay, this is actually something I can support myself on, then it's a different story. And still exciting, but then it's stressful in a new way, and you're being like, all right, this is my income now. And
You gotta sell a lot of shoes.
you got to sell a lot of shoes. And yeah, and it's cool. The shoe thing has become kind of one part of a lot of aspects of what I do. So I'm doing a lot of live activations too, which has been a lot of fun. And I think because this goes back to like how your different experience kind of all comes together in your weird way. Like I used to perform when I was a musician, right? And I used to be on stage and like do stuff in front of people. And now I do like live art at festivals or concerts or conventions and stuff. And it's like this kind of fun reincarnation of when I used to perform music, because you're kind of like creating art live, people are looking at you. And the way I draw is very kind of like freestyle. I don't really plan it. So it's a similar kind of expression. But yeah, it's been cool to like take my art and be like, all right, I'm going to have, products like custom sneakers or something like that. I'm going to have gigs, which are like live performances, live activations. I'm going to have kind of larger scale brand collaborations, whatever, packaging, murals, and it's really whatever you can think of. I mean, art is really cool that way, in that it can you can kind of fit it into a lot of different
Yeah.
places. And if people, trust you to like tell their story or their brand story in this way, then like the sky's the limit in terms of how you apply it. Um, yeah, and then there's a lot of really cool ways to just kind of like make a difference too and like do important things. So I've had a lot of fun like working with charities and philanthropies that I'm passionate about and educational things. I feel really strongly that arts education is, very needed nowadays and very underfunded, as we all know. So I've had a lot of fun working with like different educational programs and mental health charities, and you can kind of like use your art and your brand connections, business connections to bring it all together and like really help. So yeah, there's a lot of fun ways to kind of get it out there.
That's awesome. So we're gonna pause for 1 second. I realized the light got hit. So whoever's back there, if you don't mind hitting the light switches on, and then there's like the number 2. There's a circular dial. If you just hit the number 2 button on the circular dial, should turn the lights back on. There you go. Thank you so much.
Maddie, what did you do? That's my girlfriend.
Can everyone hear me okay? I know this mic, the battery died. Can you all hear me all right? Yes. Great. I'm really curious about process. I think so much of for the artists and creatives in the room, it's all about the process. And you're known for a specific style, stream of consciousness, inspired style. How did that tell us about your process? How did that style come about? When did this become, the signature for you? And also, I'm curious, was any of it informed by your background as a musician?
That's a great question. As I mentioned, I did art when I was younger, and when I was younger, I did different styles. I was like very into realism. I was very into portraits and like landscapes and things like that. And it never really made me that happy. I was very perfectionist about the result, and I wouldn't want to show it to somebody because it doesn't look quite right or whatever. But I would kind of on the side, like for fun, just do it's basically doodling. You're basically not really, you don't have a picture in mind. It doesn't need to look a certain way. You're just kind of doing it from your subconscious. And that's what I started doing a few years ago. I started to be like, all right, this is just for fun. You're just kind of taking lines and shapes and turning it into objects. You're looking at the canvas. The only thing I'm really paying attention to when I'm drawing is like trying to create a balance around the canvas between like lights and darks, which is why a lot of what I do is monochromatic, and in balances among the imagery and the lines and the shapes. That's all I'm really thinking about. And otherwise, it's kind of just you're going with the flow. And
almost like improvisational.
Exactly.
Very
so
similar, musically similar.
Compared to yeah, exactly. The music I did when I was younger was also very kind of like precise, and things needed to be, a certain way. And then I would have fun kind of just on my guitar, whatever, piano, just messing around. And it's funny, once I like really did that with my art and felt really good about it, people started to really respond to it. Because I reached a point where I'm like, I can't really make a mistake. Because if I do something a certain way, I can just turn it into something else. I can just build on it a different way. And I think people responded to that.
Yeah.
And they responded to how I felt about it. And that's and then I never looked back. I was basically like, wow, this is a way that I genuinely feel good and confident about in terms of how I express myself. And people respond to it and like it. I was like, this is something. And I'm sure that my experience improvising as a musician and, performing, being able to put yourself out there and kind of like being vulnerable very much affected that. And that's more or less my process now. I mean, now, let's say I'm working with a brand, I need to incorporate certain themes or imagery. So I'll kind of lay that out initially. And then I'm almost using my arts to kind of connect the dots between the different imagery and themes that tell the story. But when I do like more fine art pieces, I'm just like putting on music and kind of drawing, uh, and the music will kind of, I think, in my subconscious inspire, the decisions I make. Um, yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting is like in talking to so many different artists about their processes, for some artists, it's all about planning, having sort of like the end in mind. I think a lot of this happens with more film. You see this a lot in film where it's okay, we have an idea for a shot and it's all about planning, and that's the art is in the execution of that. Whereas here, similar to improvising in music, it's almost a process that requires being in this complete flow state, which is interesting
Yeah.
as a process.
Totally. I think both are really beautiful, and I hope in the future I'll work on some projects where there is a lot of planning and things like that involved. But I think that my way of expressing myself is most me when it's kind of raw, and I don't think about it too much because it's ironic. I'm an overthinker personally, So I think that when I express myself through my art in a non-thinking, subconscious way, it's kind of this other side of me. Yeah, I think everybody has a different way, of creating and expressing themselves. But I also encourage people, let's say you are like a filmmaker or a classical musician or somebody who is very, everything needs to, or painter, everything needs to be a certain way. I think it's a good exercise and a healthy way of exploring your art to go outside of that and like make yourself kind of like, I don't give a shit how it's going to turn out. I'm just going to, make something. So when I'll do like workshops sometimes and kind of encourage people, I came right here from I did like a sneaker workshop. I paint on my hand still for a bunch of lawyers in FIDI. There was like a law firm, and I did like a sneaker workshop for them, and it was so fascinating seeing these like very buttoned up, successful people like have to paint a Nike swoosh, and they all, but then they got into it, and then they were all really good, and it's cool to see that. I think everybody should like kind of push themselves sometimes to be a little looser in how they create.
Yeah, so much of improvisation is letting go of these inhibitions and the critical judgment, self-judgment, really. In comedy, improv, it's the yes and attitude that's interesting. And I think what's interesting is, part of what you do as an artist is also perform and do live paintings as well. And so, can you tell us a little bit about that process, painting and performing live, having to improvise in front of an audience?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of cool projects where I've gotten to do that. Next week, I'll be at the New York Auto Show at Javits. I'm drawing on
cool.
a McLaren, which is a lot of pressure. It's a very expensive car. and they'll basically put me in the middle of a big crowd and say, like, draw on this. And it's fun for me. I like people. I like interacting with people. So when people come out to me and be like, "Oh, what are you drawing?" Like, it's fun for me to like, talk to them about it. I do one of my shticks is I'll do like an interactive kind of mural too, because I do have this belief that everybody can draw and be an artist. So I'll do a lot of like gigs where I'll kind of set up a mural kind of with my art on it, and then encourage people at this festival or this convention to add to it, and then I kind of bring it all together with my art. It's fun, and it's a really valuable opportunity too for me to get myself out there. A lot of those live gigs have led to larger partnerships with a brand or a convention. I'm doing Coachella in a couple weeks. Music festivals are a really fun way of doing it too, because you can incorporate different like musical artists into the work as well. But I love the live art thing. It's probably the part of my career that I enjoy the most.
That's awesome.
Maybe because I channel my earlier musician history.
Love how you tie that together.
Yeah, it's and it's just like it's very pure, like the pressure kind of melts away when you kind of like hone in on what you're doing, and even though you're surrounded by a bunch of people, you're kind of just like doing your thing, and they're into it and you're into it, and it's a very fun experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love how you went from, selling shoes, and I love to say that jokingly, to performing live with your art. And so much of that has become really the basis of your ability to turn making art into a full-time living. I'm curious, how that journey has progressed over time for you, how you've conceptualized, being a full-time artist. You had the job working with Universal Music Group prior, and then now you started building brick by brick, shoe by shoe, maybe, to get to the place you are now. How do you think about building your business as an artist, and what are some things that, what are some tips and advice that you would have for others who are sort of in the same boat, trying to figure out, how do I take my art and start making it taking up more of my time versus being the thing that takes up the least amount of time?
Yeah. For me, it was kind of figuring out and exploring different methods of income, right? Like, it started with the shoes, and the shoes were a good side hustle, but as you said, I would have to draw a lot of shoes to kind of like make a career out of it. It was about kind of like putting my business hat on and thinking about my past experience working in different companies, being like, all right, what are the different pillars, more or less, of my company that I can develop and have benefit one another. So now I'll do, live art for an Adobe event, but I also drew a shoe that we're doing as a giveaway that is also the same design as the postcard product that they're selling at the event. So it's kind of trying to take, and I said this earlier when I did like the live activation, I'm like, all right, how do I take this and turn this into something larger? It's very much for me to focusing on, for lack of a better term, like business development. So every one of these events that I'm doing a live activation at, I'm like, who am I gonna meet that's gonna give me my next gig?
Yeah.
Funny example, like the subway thing happened because I Formula One in Miami last year. It was April. I got signed on to work with Voss Water, and I did like little Voss Water bottles during a Diplo show, and we like gave Diplo a bottle, and we gave this other DJ a bottle, and that's why I was there. That's all I was doing at Formula One. But there's all sorts of really cool external events and parties and dinners around there. I ended up at one of those dinners, and I'm sitting next to the CEO of Subway, and he's like, yeah, we're trying to do like a big rebrand. We're trying to like get a new look. And I'm like, I'm an artist. I can like, give you a new look. And I kind of pitched it, and he was like, all right, go make a draft and send it to me, and we'll talk about it. And I did. And then that's like how a lot of my deals have happened. It's kind of like you're there doing one thing. You meet somebody who's completely unrelated, but you like talk about what you're doing right now and see where it leads, and just like be persistent, but not too much. And yeah,
That's awesome.
It's like business stuff, but
And now you're the new Jared.
God, I know that's like the 50% of the replies I get when I say it.
Right.
Like, let's not focus on that part. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Well, to wrap it up, I'm curious, for the audience, what are some big lessons, pieces of advice that you've received along the journey that's been, super helpful for you, and what are some things that you would want to share with the audience in terms of how to take your art and really be an entrepreneur with it?
I think everybody knows that you need to work on your craft. I think that's a given, right? You need to develop your skill. But I encourage people to kind of also develop other sides of the business, which is obviously marketing yourself and putting yourself out there. It's being kind of open to new opportunities and willing to kind of you know, connect with people. I think collaboration is really, really important with artists. I think a lot of artists have a tendency to kind of really guard their art and look at it in a protective way, which is really important. But I think it's also important to feel confident enough about it that you can just put it out there and look at it as an extension of yourself. So if you feel good about what you're doing and yourself, then I think that's how you progress. I think it's really important to support and build up other artists. I think another tendency of artists is to be competitive, which is fair. And I don't think anybody ever loses that. But every situation where I was like, I could be competitive or I can build this person up, and I've chosen to build this person up, it's always benefited me. And obviously the other person. So I think that's really, really important, is to just support always. And I think being an artist is hard no matter what, because you're putting yourself in a vulnerable situation and you're kind of opening yourself up. So it's really, really important to look after yourself and your mental health and, you know, your well-being. So that's something I'm really cognizant of. And yeah, and then just like keep doing it. Keep doing it. You know, there's so many instances where I'll doubt myself, and I always will, but you just have to keep doing it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, man. Going deep on your craft, but also going wide and rounding out your skills, you know, being open to opportunity, and really sounds like you've been choosing collaboration over competition in a lot of
Always.
instances, and really honoring your own mental health and you know, so that you can keep doing it, so that you can keep pushing it for the long haul. Those are really three beautiful nuggets of wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Yeah.
it. Thank you, Alex. Give it up for Alex, everybody.